Use techniques very similar to the ones that I've used that compared basically patients with either Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis.
I'll just put this thing over here.
Okay.
Okay.
And compared them to healthy controls, or compared people during active flare-ups to remissions. And there's definitely a different microbial community that exists. Some of the bacteria, we think of Ecoli as kind of the normal gut microbe. And Ecoli and its relatives tend to be, in normal people, actually pretty rare. But they become more abundant when people have inflammatory bowel disease. And some of the bacteria that tend to be most abundant in normal, healthy individuals go down in abundance with inflammation. And it may have something to do with oxygen tolerance, because most of the bacteria that live in our gut are not tolerant of oxygen. And one of the ways our bodies deal with inflammation, one of the parts of inflammation, fighting off infection, is essentially oxygenated products. So we're exposing germs that don't like oxygen to oxygen. That's how it works. But it means that some of the gut microbes.
Wait, hang on here with that. So we have inflammation going on. Like, let's say I get poison oak or something like that, and the body wants to expose the bad stuff to oxygen, because the oxygen will kill the bad stuff. Is that kind of the idea?
And it's not just oxygen. It's various oxygenated peroxides. Oxygen is usually part of these compounds, but essentially it's a highly chemically reactive substance.
Okay.
And so in effect, yeah, our body is using these reactive substances, especially if there's germs that are usually not used to oxygen. They live and grow in places where oxygen is reduced. It can be an effective way to hurt the bacteria. And it also can cause some damage to our tissues. Some of the damage that's caused by inflammation is due to this process. But the inflammation in our gut might also be damaging the microbes that usually are there, that are not causing a problem, that are helpful to us, but that also cannot tolerate oxygen. And that may be why there's populations are decreased when people have inflammatory bowel disease.
Gotcha. Fascinating.
There's other parts of the story as well, in terms of certainly Crohn's disease. I'm no authority on either Crohn's or UC, but the thinking is that once there's been something to initiate a problem, and there's a break in the barrier function that keeps the gut microbes safely in the gut, away from the interior of the body and away from most of the immune reactivity, if somehow that system breaks down, then the normal gut bacteria, when they're in the wrong place, when our body can see them start to penetrate through the gut wall, because there are these lesions.
Sure.
Then our immune system reacts to them, because those bacteria, even though they're not the usual pathogens, they're not in the place they should be. They aren't staying in the gut. Not their fault. There's sort of an open sore. They can't help it. They get carried in.
Gotcha.
Our immune system reacts. We have this massive inflammation, and the inflammatory process perpetuates the lesions.
The army comes
that
in,
allows,
starts shooting up everywhere.
Right, and it allows the
Swiss
bacteria to penetrate. And so once something triggers it, it can be very hard to interrupt it. And that's why there may be situations where someone may get the disease under control and be in remission for a while, and then something triggers a flare-up.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
With people that I hear about, and that's common. That even happened with me back in the month of May.
Yeah.
And I went I went down to, I've been on September of '09 until May, or maybe it was even June, went to Las Vegas for a wedding, and I've been really strict on the diet that I told you about. It was an open bar. I hadn't drinking at all. Had a couple of vodkas. It turned into Jack Daniels on the rocks, and then it turned into eating off the little buffet thing, not thinking about anything. And then for about 2 weeks afterwards, I was back to a little bit of bleeding and a little bit of symptoms. You know, it wasn't and it was strange because it was 1 or maybe 2 days of doing something different, yet it was 2 weeks, I'd say, of time before things got back to how they were. So I don't know, maybe the idea you're talking about is...
Well, one of the things that I've thought of, you know, hearing your story and reading your blogs and talking to somebody else who's got in touch with me after the study, you know, there can be certain populations of microbes that will increase in abundance based on what we eat, and then as part of what we eat, not all of it will go through, but some parts of it will make their way down, and whatever residue of food we happen to eat that we haven't been eating lately allows a new population of bacteria to grow. We know that different populations of bacteria interact with the immune system differently. And I'm not talking just about the so-called friendly bacteria versus pathogens.
Okay.
Even among the bacteria that are sort of considered to be present normally, and not the pathogens, some actually secrete molecules that turn down our infectious response, our inflammatory response. So Faecalibacterium prosnitziae, this funny named bacterium, turns out to be oftentimes the most abundant single strain in a healthy person's gut. It's been shown recently to actually talk to our immune system and turn down its reactivity. It has an anti-inflammatory property.
Okay.
A lot of the probiotics that people take, these lactobacillus strains,
Questions for people about this stuff.
they're known, some of them, to have what are called immune modulatory properties. They can turn down the immune reactivity. So you'd think, well, is it a good thing to turn down our immune system? Well, if you're having symptoms due to an overactive immune system, yes, it is a good thing. But there's other strains of bacteria that live in our gut that either don't have that down-regulatory property or even may tend to upregulate the immune system. There's certain cell surface compounds that may be present only on certain strains of bacteria that really send the immune system ballistic. So maybe a normal bacterium that's usually in the gut, maybe if it gets through the intestinal barrier and the immune system sees it, it kind of sends out some alarm bells. But just one bacterium of a different strain might really send the immune system screaming, because there's these strain-to-strain differences. And at this point, it's speculation. We just don't know. But it's quite plausible that something you've eaten, you know, some component of a diet, provides a food for a bacterium that happens to be one of these real alarm ringers that when it gets abundant, it's going to really send the immune system into an active state. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the connection that perhaps the physicians aren't seeing. They don't think that diet changes the immune system, and there isn't a direct connection.